People always tell me, bro, make a video about CS source, and to that I say, there's nothing to really talk about. Most of the iconic game modes, maps, and development things are in the previous title. Everything else is a one-to-one remake, which is accurate because, let's not forget, CSS is exactly that, and most developments happened in Gmod because it gives more freedom. So it would be really difficult to focus solely on CSS. Except that one time. And today. Besides, I remembered something interesting. This game has a bizarrely divided community, the likes of which I've never seen in any CS. Up to thousands of people are straight up playing on different versions, and it's been going on for years. A very important rule when playing multiplayer games is everyone has to be on the same version. Right, that's very simple. In most cases, that would be the newest. Certain communities exist who prefer something older, and they have their own reasons. Player-based ratio is usually something like 10 to 1, as the average user typically doesn't care and updates their game regularly. Only the more dedicated would bother to set up an earlier build, except a few instances where the developer offers a legacy client for all those ancient fossils. This isn't anything unusual for gaming in general, and CS is no stranger. Niches playing older versions are out there. I'm not talking about 1.6, but pre-Steam versions and even betas. Curiously, in the case of CS Source, the norm is not to play the latest. It's very noticeable because I've encountered this many times, and I'm sure everyone has had at least one instance of trying to join a server only to get kicked because you're not on their version. Nobody ever talks about this phenomenon, and I am really curious to analyze why this divide is so prevalent. To set the stage, here's what we got. There aren't hundreds of different versions, just 2 old and a third being current Steam, which is obviously the least interesting, so I'll be mostly using it as a point of comparison, while our focus is on the others. And unfortunately, there aren't options to switch between builds or anything. Obviously, they exist through piracy, and even so, what makes it necessary for things to be like this? Why aren't these versions compatible between each other? That would be because Source has gone through several major updates over its lifespan. If you launch the current Steam version of Half-Life 2, you aren't playing the exact same game from 2004, but the latest engine branch update. It's the same thing with CS, beginning with Source 2004, then Source 2006 branch, which was then succeeded by the Orange Box branch in 2007, but there was an addition in 2009 for multiplayer titles, which CS Source got updated to in 2010, and lastly, Source 2013. These branches feature updates that make cross-version play impossible. For example, Orange Box has things like high dynamic range rendering, shadow mapping, VTF 7.3 and 7.4 support, advanced flowing emission, and much more. It's a bit convoluted to explain what exactly are the differences between each branch, and I could spend all day reading through new features, which to most of you and me will sound like techno gibberish. So when it comes to our old CSS builds, we have people playing V34, which is the oldest of the 3 that runs the smoothest on potato PCs because of the lower requirements. The next is Orange Box that appeals to people who, I don't even know. And Steam is for plebeians. Piracy habits and graphics aside, let's analyze. Because I'm sure what you just saw didn't really look like different versions, but stick with me. Now, why did people choose specifically V34? Why not go with, say, the first release version? Surely it's even easier to run. While that may be true, the problem is, if you didn't know, CSS at release was missing a lot of content. I'm talking maps, player models, and demo replays. It's only by 2006 when everything was finally there. Yeah, you think CS2 is the only one with missing features at release?
This guy fell off.
Anyway, the actual date we can see by typing version in console, which is December 3rd, 2009. So I tried this old ass, and game feel is the same. Servers are also a bloated, incomprehensible mess as always. I ran some tests, and nothing really stood out except grenades being smoother and different smoke effects. Visually, however, the lack of HDR is noticeable, along with textures on maps looking a bit bleached and sharper than usual. Reflections are also different, but these small graphical observations don't really hinder gameplay, except maybe the dust clouds for long range. On to Orange Box. Here I can at least offer a starting point, and that would be June 23rd, 2010. This update was packed with new achievements, Steam PFPs, player stats, summary screens, end of round MVP, domination and revenge system. I guess they thought CSS needed the TF2 treatment. But most notably, the new engine branch with the now higher requirements that isn't directly mentioned, but instead hints like multi-core rendering and better HDR support are present. Nothing else really, which makes me wonder all the more why did the non-Steam public even bother with this? One patch note I didn't mention is the removal of the tick rate command and defaulting servers to 66 instead of being 33 and modifiable up to 100. This sounds bad on one hand, but seems like it may have been circumvented as I haven't found any info of people complaining about being forced to play on lower ticks like we see with CS2. A very big caveat I haven't mentioned so far about Orange Box is it's been long dead, and I definitely remember a separate player base on V48, V52, V60. Yeah, it was interchangeable, but still the same branch. Nonetheless, the changes introduced are still very much present today. There is still a third player base technically on V92 specifically, which is from 2021 apparently, but at this point, we're on source 2013. At the end of the day, this isn't just about engine characteristics and squeezing the most performance out of it. A lot of people will swear on their lives that CSS used to have better gunplay and movement, and the game version of today is much worse. I'm sorry to say, this is the one CS I don't have thousands of hours into, so I can't sympathize in the same way, but I'll try my best to investigate and compare as objectively as possible using V34 and latest Steam, both with the same settings. First off, I read through all the patch notes between 09 and 25 to find written changes, and I came across some interesting things. In 2011, there were a couple of CSS beta client patches addressing weapon accuracy and balance. This all culminated in a final September 15th update that's pretty extensive, but here are the most important lines. All weapons now have a new accuracy model which fixes many bugs and provides more intuitive weapon behavior, and weapon spread patterns are no longer square. Believe me, I am not missing chromosomes, but some of this wording is cryptic. Nevertheless, I'm not comparing all weapons cause this is old CS, so only a few actually matter, and as we can see from the stationary spray, there is a difference. I promise you, it's not just the decal sizes, but spread patterns in V34 seem to be less random. That doesn't grant it an automatic point, because unrelated to the patch note, you might have noticed rate of fire is also noticeably slower. The M4 is on point, but for example, the AK has a massive difference, and believe me, the clips are synced to the frame. Weapons now have separate accuracy penalties for jumping, landing, and standing on ladders. Accuracy penalties for movement no longer have a discrete threshold but scale between crouch, move, and run speed. Okay, this is a lot clearer to understand. So for jumping and shooting, in both instances, it's naturally awful and so random I cannot really discern what makes them different. But in the case of post-landing accuracy, I found that in V34 it's almost a normal pattern, but on Steam it's way more random. Tangentially related, all rifles are less accurate while running. Testing it out, yeah, I can feel how the spread is more spread out and random, greatly discouraging running and gunning. Decreased range of shotguns while slightly increasing damage, yeah, that checks out. Sniper rifles now zoom faster. I guess they do, but it's almost unnoticeable. Everything else is small buffs and nerfs here and there. The only other significant documented weapon change relates to standing and moving accuracy for pistols, plus fixing the op quick switch exploit that made it shoot faster for some reason, along with general decreased accuracy while moving with sniper rifles. Overall though, the shooting mechanics in V34 are easier to handle and require less precise aiming and timing. I've also heard numerous times the movement is better, so I tried basic peaks plus some other movement practice as if I'm doing cardio, and honestly, I don't necessarily feel anything different. As for autistic skilled movement, unfortunately I ran into a problem. B-hopping in CS is done using the scroll wheel, because each little click is an input, making consecutive timing of each jump perfect. But in V34, it doesn't work, as if the inputs are not registering like they typically should. I tried everything from commands, config edits, and even obtaining V34 from other sources. It's the same all the time. Actually, I found out in servers it works normally, but no new discoveries to announce. Perhaps it doesn't matter, because I can just go to Steam CSS, punch in SV enable bunny hopping 1 to engage food mode, so there's that. Finally, I spent some time on a bunch of servers between both versions that I assume are running with the best settings possible, so I can try and understand if anything about the tick rates feels different, and once again, I'm sorry to say there's nothing concrete to report, so maybe the post-orange box restriction has been circumvented. All things considered, aside from what we discussed about weapons, the rest I cannot factually prove. Not that this whole comparison was about determining a winner, just looking for discrepancies. I understand if you think this is coming off as rather inconclusive. I did what I could to recreate one-to-one scenarios, but I'm not the type to sit down and deconstruct the entire game down to the code and seriously dig into it. If you honestly think your preferred CSS version is better, cool, go have fun. I personally get that V34 is easier in a way, but did the future updates definitively make the game worse? Some things yes, but some things no. There's enough people out there who don't care and are fine with how it is today. Oh, and before we forget about V92, I guess some people prefer the newer feel and gameplay, but they don't have the ability or cannot afford to buy the game. That's my only assumption that could justify its existence. Old or new, it all goes to show how the CS community can never agree on anything, even if it concerns the same game. There will be people coming out of the woodworks to point out how a specific version was the best, and nobody can ever doubt them. So that is why I am going to continue being impartial to everything, a total fence-sitter, so I don't get one side mad, but instead all of them. Now excuse me, I have to go repaint spots on my walls because I thought using double-sided tape to stick stuff wouldn't end up peeling the paint when I remove them. Guess I should just install shelves.